Listen up!
Let's go!
This is a podcast simulator.
Bring it on!
Hello and welcome everyone to the first ever episode of the Podcast Simulator with your host, the one, the only, the utterly obsessed video game fangirl, me, Jessica Ranhotra. Every week, we'll be taking a look at one video game, PC, Xbox, or PlayStation, we don't discriminate here, and discuss the ethical choices within these games. This episode, we'll be taking a look at one of my personal favorites, Life is Strange. So, plug in your headphones, turn up your volume, and let's get started. Before we jump into this podcast, we should probably have a little refresher on the plot of the game. Life is Strange follows the story of Max Caulfield, your typical hipster photography student attending the prestigious Blackwell Academy, a high school which has as much talent as it does drama. The game opens with Max having a vision of a tornado destroying her town of Arcadia Bay. She wakes up and realizes that she's still in her photography class taught by the one and only, very talented, and very attractive, Mr. Jefferson. Once class ends, she goes to the washroom to freshen up after that surprisingly realistic dream. In the washroom, Max sees a blue butterfly, and being the photographer that she is, she decides to take a picture. As soon as she snaps the shot, Nathan Prescott enters the bathroom in a psychotic rage. Oh, wait, did you forget who Nathan Prescott is? Well, he's your typical private school snob. His insanely wealthy and well-established family practically owns Arcadia Bay, which makes the whole town a playground for this rich bastard. Then enters Chloe, Max's best friend who she hasn't seen for 5 years. Nathan and Chloe get in an argument about a drug deal gone wrong, and they solve their issues by talking like reasonable adults. Just kidding. Nathan shoots Chloe. This triggers a change in Max, which allows her to reverse time. So she uses her rewind power and hits a fire alarm in the bathroom that distracts Nathan, allowing Chloe to escape. Max and Chloe proceed to reconnect and catch each other up on their lives. Max tells Chloe about her powers and her vision of the tornado, and Chloe tells Max about her missing friend, Rachel Amber. Who is Rachel Amber? Only the most popular and universally liked student in all of Arcadia Bay. Max decides to use her powers to find Rachel Amber and stop the tornado. So to find her, they investigate their 3 primary suspects. Number 1, Nathan Prescott, that rich bastard. Number 2, David Madsen, Chloe's extremely paranoid stepdad and head of security at Blackwell Academy. And last but not least, number 3, Frank Bowers, the local drug dealer and Rachel Amber's boyfriend. They put together all the clues and discover the Dark Room, which is basically a bunker underneath an old barnyard owned by the Prescotts, where Nathan has been kidnapping and drugging local high school girls to take non-consensual photos. Because, you know, everyone has their hobbies. In this dark room, Max and Chloe discover a series of pictures of Rachel Amber. The last picture shows her in a junkyard. Max and Chloe rush there and begin digging in the spot Rachel was last photographed. They discover Rachel Amber's dead body. Max and Chloe then rush to a party being held at Blackwell Academy in order to confront Nathan. However, that rich bastard isn't there. Just when they're about to give up and go to the police, they receive a text from Nathan saying, and I quote, "Glad you got one last look at Rachel. Nobody will ever find her again after I'm done." Max and Chloe rush back to the junkyard and find that the body is still there. And they report it to the police and they lived happily ever after. Just kidding. While Max and Chloe are distracted, someone grabs Max and drugs her. This disables Max from using her rewind powers. Just when you think it can't get any worse, Chloe is shot and killed. The camera pans up and reveals, plot twist, Mr. Jefferson? Then he takes Max to the dark room, where he drugs and photographs her. Mr. Jefferson reveals that he has killed Nathan, who was just being used as a scapegoat. Just when we think it's over for our poor hipster homegirl, David Madsen busts in and beats the shit out of Mr. Jefferson and rescues Max. She then uses Jefferson's car to get to the lighthouse where she meets up with Chloe. Max suddenly passes out and has a nightmare in which she realizes that her time traveling has created the tornado. When Max wakes up, she sees the tornado closing in on the town. Chloe gives Max the photo of the blue butterfly. At this point, the player can either choose to rip the photo and save Chloe while sacrificing the town, or travel back in time and let Chloe die so that the tornado never reaches the town. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the entire plot of Life is Strange in under 3 minutes. Well, now that we have that out of the way, let's get into it. Life is Strange is a crazy game with crazy choices. Some were easy, like deciding whether or not you should water your plants, while some were more difficult, like sacrificing your best friend for the greater good. So, I've decided to hit the SLC at Ryerson to hear the people's voices and get their opinions on these tough choices. You're hanging out at the park with your best friend. A guy shows up saying that your friend owes him money. Suddenly, he pulls a knife on your friend, and you happen to have a gun. Do you shoot or not, and why?
No, I wouldn't shoot because that's wrong and it's illegal. So I don't want to go to jail because I'm still in school.
I'm gonna shoot, sorry. I'm gonna shoot because you're endangering not only my best friend, but myself, and it's a form of self-defense. If you pull a knife on me, I'm gonna pull my gun on you.
You're transported to an alternate universe in which your best friend was in a horrible car accident. Their respiratory system is failing, and the only way they're kept alive is through medical machines. Your friend tells you that they're suffering. They ask you to crank up the IV to 11 so they can die in peace. Do you grant their request or no, and why?
Eventually it just comes down to the way they feel about life and their emotions, and I think everyone has the right to make that decision for themselves, and if it's their wish, then it should be granted.
No, because I believe when you're in pain, your mind doesn't really work at its best, so she might be going through just a weird moment.
Your hometown is about to be destroyed by a tornado. The only way to save the town is to sacrifice your best friend. Do you sacrifice the town, or do you sacrifice your best friend?
I would let my friend live because, well, that's my friend, first of all. And second of all, town can be rebuilt. But a friendship like that, if I lose, I probably cannot rebuild.
I can't sacrifice myself, it's got to be my best friend. Yeah. All right, yeah, I'm going to have to sacrifice the best friend. The overall effect on the world will be less from one person dying than it will be from a town.
I don't know about that one. I gotta pass.
So there you have it. Those were the people's voices on these tough choices. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the studio segment of the podcast simulator. Today, I have the always lovely Jennifer Monroe.
Aww, you're so sweet. Oh, yay.
So, you want to give a little introduction?
I'm Jennifer Monroe, and I love all things video games, stories.
And that's why we're friends.
Yeah.
Okay, so what were your favorite and least favorite aspects of the game?
I like the idea of progressing through a story where you can make different choices, rewind and go back and do it again, kind of as an alternative to like a save point per se. My least favorite aspect, plot convenience.
So just going back to that whole plot thing, right? Like sometimes there's another complaint that a lot of people had. It basically people felt that it boiled down to just two decisions, Bay or Bay. For those of you who don't know, Arcadia Bay or Chloe Price. Do you feel like that was an appropriate choice, or do you feel like that was a cop-out?
I think there definitely should have been more endings. Like, I'm going to use Dragon Age as an example. Depending on some major plot choices, of course, you get some of the larger endings, but just some of the smaller aspects, like which characters got with which characters and what the political situation would look like afterwards or stuff like that. I think they could have definitely done something along those lines instead of just being, well, you either kill your best friend or you kill the entire town. And, I mean, because you had so many different choices in the game itself, and the fact that it just boils down to the same two choices is disappointing.
Did you see both endings?
Yes, I did see both endings.
Which one did you prefer?
I choose the canonically correct one, which is Arcadia Bay, because I'm an if you're going by Dungeons and Dragons characteristics, neutral good, the needs of the many over the needs of the few. So I mean, as much as we loved Chloe and we fell in love with her, I mean, she's like the best character ever. She's not worth all the other lives because there could be so many other people that are like that important to other people, and keeping yourself happy and like making everyone else unhappy by doing so is not a fair thing to do.
Okay, so my next question is, we've seen a lot of choice-driven games like rising in popularity like crazy, like any of the Telltale game titles or Until Dawn. Why do you think there's such a trend? Why do you think people are so drawn to these games?
I think it appeals to a different crowd than normal games would appeal to. Like, when I first got into video games, there were no Telltale games or story-driven games like we have now. So gamers might not be interested in it, but the fact that we're getting other people into it as well is increasing the popularity of it.
Well, that's all the time we have today for our studio segment. I want to thank Jennifer Monroe so much for her time. She was amazing and awesome, and all the amazing input she gave was, again, awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. You're so kind.
Unfortunately, dear listeners, that's all the time we have today for video game fangirling/fanboying. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of the Podcast Simulator. Make sure to follow me on Twitter at the Podcast Simulator and send me your suggestions for what games I should talk about next. Thanks for listening, and see you guys next week for another episode of the Podcast Simulator.